Good morning, Year 6. I hope you're well and ready for your reading session. I hope you've had a good morning so far and all is well. So today within our reading, we're going to conclude Chapter 5 of Private Peaceful. As part of that, we're going to analyse what a question's asking us. We're going to consider what different characters believe and think and try and understand how our evidence uh, shows this. So sorry, I was supposed to say that unclearly. We'll think about what they think. We're going to see why they might think that, and finally, we're going to support our point about their beliefs, about their perceptions, with evidence from the text. Okay, right, guys. A little bit of recall. You can shout your answers out on this, or you can write your answers down. Here we've got gaps. Okay, so what I've got here is a sentence which is needing a sentence. Molly's who says she was born in sin. So which character which is related to Molly says that she was born in sin? What did Big Joe relationship between Charlie and Tommy? Big Joe was Charlie and Tommy's mother, sister. Tommy blames himself for his mother's death, or whose death? Whose death does he blame himself for? And finally, Tommy was passing Charlie and Molly's kangaroos. They were passing kangaroos to each other. What were they passing between each other? Okay, try and fill those ones in. Shout them out if you want, just to remember elements of the text, please. Okay, we're going to carry on then today with page 74. If you remember, we've identified that these letters have been going between Molly and Charlie, and now somebody's caught them in the act, Molly's mother. Okay, and what she says. So Charlie said, that's why she wouldn't tell you herself. So Charlie here is talking, isn't he, to his Tommy. They've been caught. The Molly's mother's banned them, forbidden them from ever seeing one another again. But up to this point, Charlie hadn't told Tommy the nature of the letters that were going on. They weren't just friendly letters. They were obviously love letters. Know what? When it was just letters, it didn't seem to matter so much. But later, this is where Charlie and Molly, Charlie's admitting that him and Molly have been seeing each other. But later, after we began seeing each other, we didn't want to hide it from you, Tom, I'm honest. But we didn't want to hurt you either. You love her, don't you? I didn't answer. There was no need. The idea of there being no need shows maybe his face tells the story he does love Molly, but also maybe shows this bond between Tommy and Charlie means that even if Tommy didn't say he did love her, Charlie knows that he's his brother. Well, so do I, Tomo. So you'll understand why I'm going to keep on seeing her. I'll find a way no matter what that old cow says. He turned to me. Still friends? Friends, I mumbled. But I did not mean it. Again, this love that Charlie's got for Molly and the love that Tommy's got for Molly is making the point now that Tommy and Charlie's relationship's got more and more complicated. After that, no more was ever said between us about Molly. I never asked because I didn't want to know. I didn't want even to think about it, but I did. I thought about nothing else. So always in his head, always there. No one could understand why, but shortly after this, Bertha began to go missing from time to time. She hadn't wandered off at all until now. She'd always stuck close to Big Joe. Wherever Big Joe was, that's where you'd be sure to find Bertha. Big Joe was frantic with worry every time she went off. She'd come back home in the end of course, when she felt like it. Either that or Mother and Joe would find her somewhere all muddied and wet and lost, and they'd bring her home. But the great worry was that she'd start chasing after sheep and cows, and that some farmer or landowner would shoot her, as they'd shoot any dog they found trespassing on their land that could be molesting their animals. Molesting means to interfere with something. So if we're looking at this page, we can see now that the characters are worried that Bertha will keep running off. And they're worried about that because of the fact that Bertha in the past has gone into different lands, and if she goes onto a farmer's land and interferes with their sheep, so tries to bite their sheep, tries to eat their sheep, they'll do something to her. They'll shoot her. Okay? And we can see that going onto somebody's land that you shouldn't go is called trespassing. We can see this by looking at the context where the word appears. So trespassing is found right near the bottom of page 74, and we can read that sentence. So we've got that they'd shoot any dog they found trespassing on their land. They'd shoot any dog. Okay, so any dog trespassing. Trespassing, you wouldn't shoot something if you were letting it onto your land. So trespassing with a dog means to come onto the land when you're not allowed onto it. Trespassing is to go somewhere you're not allowed to. Trespassing, three syllables there. And it's to go onto someone else's land without permission. So if you come into my back garden I haven't got a gun. But if you come into my back garden and I don't let you, whoever you might be, you're trespassing. You're going into somebody's space without permission. That's trespassing. Okay, and whenever the people were found trespassing on the Lord's estate, they were arrested. So normally with people, they don't tend to be shot at. Okay, they tend to be arrested or chased away if they're trespassing. With animals, people seem to find it more acceptable to shoot at them or to hurt them physically. Synonyms for trespassing might be encroaching or invading. I'd love to see somebody use encroaching and trespassing in your writing over the next week or two. Are you going to be a soldier trying to encroach on the other battalion's location in the Somme? Antonyms then, leaving or avoiding. So if you don't go somewhere, you avoid it. And if you leave somewhere, you're not trespassing, you're going from that place to a different place. Okay. Trespassing is when you come onto land that's not yours. Okay. Fortunately, Bertha didn't seem to go chasing sheep. And anyway, up until now, she had never been gone that long, nor stayed too far, nor strayed too far. Straying is when she stays away for a long time. We did our very best to keep her from wandering. Mother tried shutting her in the woodshed, but Big Joe couldn't stand her howling and would let her out. And that's that empathy he's got with animals, but maybe a lack of awareness of the world they're living in. She tried tying her up. This is Mother, but Bertha could chew at the rope and whine incessantly. So whine and whine and whine and whine and whine incessantly is this great adverb to show somebody keeping going, keeping going, keeping going, keeping going. Incessantly means you keep doing it, you keep doing it, you keep doing it. I'm incessantly reminding you that incessantly means to keep going, 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 and whine incessantly. So that in the end, Big Joe would always take pity and go and untie her. Then, one afternoon, Bertha went missing again. This time she did not come back. This time we could not find her. Charlie wasn't about. Mother and Big Joe went one way looking for her, down towards the river, and we're starting to build up the tension. We can see we're worried. The characters are worried. They're looking for her. We move them around. They still haven't found her. They still haven't found her. This technique where the bit pressure's building up as Michael Morpurgo tells us more and more. Down towards the river. And I went up into the woods whistling for her, calling for her. There were deer to be found up in Ford's Cleve Wood and badgers and foxes, and maybe she's been seeking there. But it would be just the sort of pace you go. I'd been an hour or more searching in the woods with no sign of her, not a sign. Still looking for her. Where's Bertha? Where's Bertha? We're worried. Where's Bertha? Where's Bertha? I was about to give up and go back. Perhaps she'd gone home by now anyway. When I heard a shot ringing out across the valley, it came from somewhere higher in the woods. A shot. If you think back to the last page, what happens to dogs that are trespassing? A shot. I ran back up the track, ducking the low slung branches, leaping the badger holes, dreading but already knowing what I would find. What do you predict? What do you think he's found? What do you think he's going to find? I came up the rise. I could see ahead of me the chimney of Father's old shack, and then the shack itself at the side of the clearing. Outside lay Bertha, her tongue lolling, the grass beside her soaked with blood. The colonel stood. We'll find that in a second. Dreading. When we feel dreading but already knowing what I would find. Dreading. Are we feeling excited or are we worried about what we're about to find? Do we think we already know it? Looking at that context, try and complete that for dread. The colonel stood looking down at her, shotgun in his hand. The door of the shack opened and Charlie and Molly were standing there, frozen in disbelief and horror. Then Molly ran over to where Bertha lay and fell to her knees. Why? She cried, looking up at the colonel. Why? Again, the story's moved on, hasn't it? Why do we now think that Bertha had been going off? What had caused Bertha to be going off to? It wasn't a random. She was going after Charlie, wasn't she? Because what was Charlie doing? Charlie was meeting up with Molly. Where were they meeting? Father's old cottage or Father's old hut. So they were going secretly, furtively to meet up, to clandestinely meet up. And when they were going there, Bertha was following them. Because Bertha followed them, she'd gone onto land that she was not allowed to go onto. She'd trespassed. Because she'd trespassed, who'd killed her? The colonel. Charlie and Morris were standing there, frozen in disbelief and horror. So that phrase is really powerful. Frozen in disbelief and horror. Can you think of some lovely synonyms? Can you think of synonym phrases rather than just synonym words? Can you think of phrases that have the same effect? And try and complete that for frozen in disbelief. Okay, we've got the vocabulary work. We've done that. Our next challenge, guys, is to think about the evidence on page 74 that Pico cares about Bertha. I mean, the fact that he's described as frantic with worry every time she went off demonstrates he cares about her. That's a good man, good answer. Okay. However, additionally, this is a better answer now. Additionally, information that Joe or mother would find her demonstrates that he expends lots of energy searching for her. So if he's just worried, it shows he cares about her. But he's worried, but then he goes and looks for her and looks for her and looks for her and looks for her. Shows he's not just worried and pretending to be worried. But the second part of this answer is that he actually goes and spends energy and time looking for her whenever she goes off. And we now know, don't we, why she's been going off, as she's been following Charlie when he meets up with Molly in the hut. How do you, inference here, how do we see that Mrs. Peaceful is worried on page 75 about Bertha? So again, if you look to our answer previously, a point and a justification with reference to the text, please, 2 or 3 sentences. So looking at page 75, why do you think landowners would shoot dogs? Put the S on the end of landowners in the question for me, please, guys. What's the reason? Why would they shoot them? Can you use that verb to describe what animals were doing when they were trespassing on the land? Why wouldn't Charlie stop seeing Molly? What do you think? What's the reason they didn't just take the guidance and stop? And how does the author show that the Molly thinks the Colonel has been unreasonable? What does the author show Molly is doing? Because she doesn't go, sorry, Colonel, you are unreasonable. She does something, she says something, she acts in a way. Okay. 2 or 3 sentences for each of those, please. Some really depth-filled answers. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention, Year 6. I really do look forward to seeing those answers. See you soon.